Hello, and I am back, and Matt's back, and thank you very much to Bram and to Nantita and Sudha. That was really, really interesting. Lots of comments about the courage it takes to challenge the Thai monarchy. We think we've got it difficult here, but yeah, in other countries, and not just Thailand, it's really very challenging. There's also campaigners in places like Eswatini, formerly Swaziland, trying to get rid of their monarchy as well. So maybe we'll have a chat with them at some point in the future. But we will be trying to keep these connections going, and if we can, as Bram mentioned, the European Alliance, if we can do anything to help. It strikes me the similarity. There's been a lot of commentary on social media just recently about the uniforms that our royals wear here in the UK and all the ridiculous medals and things. It seems to me that it's very similar medals and uniforms in Thailand, and I think that our accepting our monarchy somehow legitimizes those monarchies. Now we're going to bring on, if I can find it, Tommy Sheppard, who is SNP MP, and Norman Baker, who is former MP and former government minister, and of course, author of And What Do You Do? Which we'll come on to. There was also, before we chat to Norman and Tommy, there were questions about our merchandise. So there is a lot of merchandise, including our very own Make Elizabeth the Last Abolish the Monarchy mug and t-shirt. There's loads of stuff on the shop, so go online and find something that you like. So hello to Norman and Tommy. Maybe if I just get each of you to say a few words, and then we'll open up to a conversation. Norman, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Did you want to have any reflections on what's been going on recently, and what you've been talking? I know you've been going around the studios doing some discussions. What you've been talking about today?
Thank you, Graham, and good afternoon to everybody, including Tommy, wherever you are, up in Scotland, I guess. It's been an interesting weekend, and monarchists will no doubt take comfort from the superficial conclusion that all is well with the monarchy and everybody's very happy with what's going on, and they're all out there supporting the Queen. I think that would be a deeply erroneous view and somewhat complacent, because what's happening is a combination of factors. First of all, people are being quite nice to someone who's 96 and still around, as you are to any 96-year-old. Secondly, we're all getting a bank holiday extra. We're getting a first post-COVID junket for some people who've been stuck inside for years because of COVID, and we're having a supply of nice weather to keep us all happy. So I think the weekend is a combination of those things, and if people were to read into it support for the monarchy, I think that would be an erroneous conclusion to read. And in fact, what is clear is that there is underlying unhappiness with the present arrangements. I think more widespread among the population than sometimes are given vent. And the reason for that is because people, by and large, have some respect for the Queen as a person and don't particularly wish to be rude and upset someone who's in their 90s. But I think the situation will change quite dramatically when the Queen goes. Why? First of all, we're seeing, and you've dealt with it this afternoon, Graham, with your connections around the world, the number of countries where the British monarch as head of state is going to diminish quite significantly, I think, quite shortly after the Queen goes. Secondly, the personality of Charles. This shouldn't be about personality, of course, it should be about concept, but the personality of Charles is a relevant factor, and he comes with baggage, and he's not as respected as a Queen for all sorts of reasons, for his accumulation of money in a rather grasping way from the public purse, the way he treated Princess Diana, his somewhat eccentric views on a number of issues, such as homeopathy, and so on. So he comes with baggage and will not have the same level of support that the Queen does. And then I think that the royals are very vulnerable in a range of issues, not least of all finance, which I cover in my book in some detail. And I think once we get some proper exposure of finances in the press, which we will at some point, then the public will see matters which are pretty indefensible. The New York Times today has a headline talking about the imperial fiction that Britain is suffering from, and I think it's a very good description. In my view, the royal family and the monarchy are holding us back rather than taking us forward, because reinforcing the view that somehow we're still the great power we were in the Second World War, that Churchill sat down with Stalin and Roosevelt, we're all still there. We're not still there. We're a different country altogether, and we need to face up to that. We will face up to it at some point, and at that point, the royal family will look very, very dated indeed. We already have not just a monarchy in this country, but the last imperial monarchy, the German Kaiser, the Austrian-Hungarian Emperor, the Russian Tsar. They've all gone, but we've still got our imperial monarchy where, as Toby will know, we are supposed to be subjects of an unelected person. And I could not take my seat in Parliament until I'd taken an oath to an unelected person, notwithstanding I won an election, on the basis of my views on this and other matters. It's incredibly difficult to get Parliament to act on these matters. It's made very more difficult by the rules of the House of Commons. I was the only MP, I think, who introduced a debate on the monarchy in my 18 years. And the only reason I was able to do so was by linking it back to an obscure 1993 Treasury document. You're not allowed to do anything other than that. So we need to update the arrangements we have in this country. I think the public are ready for it. The opinion polls show that young people in particular do not have the affinity towards or the affection for the monarchy, which the older generation does. So it's time limited. It will go at some point, and sooner rather than later, perhaps. Charles, last point from me. Charles has the opportunity to reform it, and the best chance for monarchists is if Charles substantially reforms the monarchy when he takes the throne. But there's no indication he will do that. The indication is he will carry on pretty much as normal. Fewer people in the balcony, but everything else still in place. And that bodes ill for the future of the monarchy, which I guess people in this particular event today will be happy with.
Thank you very much, Norman. I mean, Tommy, the opinion polling recently across the UK is showing a drop in support for the monarchy. And there's been a lot of talk about, well, away from the BBC and ITV, there's been chatter about some of this and some of the lack of interest, particularly in Scotland. So, I mean, in Scotland, polling shows support has dropped well below 50%. And the Scottish have more or less ignored the Jubilee. Do you think that there is a much stronger sense of republicanism in Scotland?
I think there probably is, Graham. First of all, it's a delight to be here. I've been able to dip in and out of the conference throughout the day, but I'm joining you now from Sainsbury's car park in Meadowbank in East Edinburgh, because I've just come away from a rally for the Republic held here in the capital of Scotland at the National Monument in Calton Hill, if anybody knows it, overlooking the castle. And there were several hundred people there, convened at very short notice, and it was a remarkably good-natured and positive event on what is the most glorious day of the year here so far in terms of the weather, and on a day when people have got a lot of other competing things to do. So I was delighted to speak at that rally, and there were more people at it than I can assure you than there would be at any street party in Scotland in support of the Jubilee. There's literally no sign of it here in Edinburgh, apart from in the supermarket chains who have gone overboard in promoting the Jubilee and trying to make a buck out of it. But I think possibly ill-advised given their Scottish customer base. So opinion is changing here, but we still have the problem of creating space for a legitimate debate and putting forward what is a reasonable and rational argument that people should elect those who govern them, and in particular their head of state. And we don't face the same problems they do in Thailand, obviously, that we've just been hearing about. But we do face, I think, a concerted campaign to ignore us, in the hope that that by minimizing the public space, and in particular the airtime that we get, these ideas will not gain traction. And I think those who try to close down that debate are wrong and are losing the argument. And I think the more the BBC, makes a fool of itself and embarrasses itself as an institution with its wall-to-wall, genuflection of all things royal, the more people are going to say there's something not right here. This is the sort of thing we would criticize and condemn were it to happen in other countries. So I think I feel quite positive about this, and I'm heartened by listening to some of the contributions from around the world, where the old empire is disintegrating. The old ideas that underpinned it are disintegrating, and I think that will happen in this country too. I think it will probably happen last in the southwest of England, or the southeast of England rather, and the closer one gets to the metropolis, the harder it will be. But I think also, people have mentioned the fact about Queen as an individual has a lot of respect, and I think it was also said is very popular, and that's true, and in part because of the way her persona and her activity has been choreographed and managed and promoted, and there's been a very effective team around her. And I think a lot of that empathy for Queen Elizabeth is genuine, but this probably marks the high point of support for the monarchy in Britain. And once she goes, that support will dwindle. So I think we have an opportunity with the succession to really accelerate the debate on this. And I was taken with what you said yourself, Graham, in that an idea can catch fire mightily quickly. Change can happen very, very quickly if the underlying sort of conditions are there. And with support for abolition approaching a third of the population in the UK and half the population in Scotland, I think we could run through the gears in this very quickly once we have King Charles III in office. As Norman just said, I mean, he would do well to instigate a review of the monarchy himself. He could slim it down. He could cut spending. He could bring in. He could agree to pay taxes. He could get rid of some of the palaces. Could open it up to freedom of information and do a whole lot of things that would look to modernize it, and that might just buy him another generation. But I don't think he's going to do that. It might be a smart move on our side to try and give him the opportunity, the space to do that, and have him decline. And then abolition would be the only policy left standing. Finally, just a word about how this plays in the current political debate in Scotland, because obviously there's a live debate here about constitutional matters more generally, and in particular the question of whether Scotland should become an independent country. The referendum in 2014 produced a 55-45 majority for the Union, but that did not settle the matter. And last year, people in Scotland elected a new Scottish government in the Scottish Parliament with a majority committed to having another referendum on the question of independence. And the First Minister has pledged that will happen before the end of next year. So we'll see how that pans out as we run through the months ahead, but it does beg the question about how that debate relates to this debate about the monarchy. And I think my view is that probably the vast majority of people who want to see Scotland be an independent country also want to abolish the monarchy. However, having said that, you don't have to want to abolish the monarchy to want Scotland to be an independent country, and you don't have to believe in independence to want an elected head of state. So I think both campaigns would be wise and well advised to try and keep their tent as big as possible, and make sure that there are no barriers to people joining the campaign for change. So I work with monarchists here to achieve an independent Scotland, because an independent Scotland gives people the right to choose their future, and in particular to choose whether or not they wish to have an elected head of state or keep the monarchy. And it might well be, it's theoretically possible, that in an independent Scotland, there might be a majority of people who say, do you know what, we'll just keep King Charles III as the head of state. Somehow I doubt that, but I'll take my chances with the people and let them decide, because at the end of the day, that's what democracy is all about. So I'm quite buoyed up by today's events. I'm feeling quite positive. and I think there's a lot we can do to build this campaign. And once the succession takes place, I think we can begin to really run through the gears and turn this into a mass campaign for change.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And we did have our conference in 2014 in Edinburgh, about 2 months before the referendum, and we were very clear that we were not taking sides on the independence question, and our slogan was yes or no, the monarchy must go. So the argument essentially is whether it's one state or two, one head of state or two, everybody should be able to choose their head of state. Norman, I don't think you were
there will, of course, Graham, there will of course be a few people here who want to abolish one monarchy and replace it with another. Yes, well, there is that, which I never understand. But monarchy is not a good idea, whatever heritage or lineage it is. But Norman, I don't think you were here earlier when Andrew Scott was, aka Otto English, who wrote Fake History, was on here. Is talking about how the royals are mythologized, and it kind of reminded me a little bit about what you were saying in your book about in the introduction about the disconnection between what you saw when the Queen visited that, whatever that was, that community centre, and the way the press reported, which touches on what Tommy was saying about the way the BBC embarrassed itself. Can you,
yes,
I mean,
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more than with Tommy about the BBC. It's absolutely shocking the way they report royal matters, and indeed the press generally doesn't serve us very well. They either have highly intrusive behaviour, such as following Princess Diana around down the street trying to make her cry, which is what they did, or helicopters above Prince Harry's house, which is not really very fair, or they bend over themselves to be sycophantic beyond belief and take the PR photos the royal family sends out of kids on their birthday, who are always apparently adorable. I imagine they're just normal kids, but they're presented as being adorable always. That's the adjective used. I mean, the press does not serve us very well. How many articles are in the press about the royal finances or about the way the Queen and Prince Charles influence legislation behind the scenes with Queen's consent, which no one really knows about very much? Where is all that? Where is the fact that the inheritance tax wasn't paid when the Queen Mum died? We should be hearing about all these things big time, but we don't. And the BBC is the worst offender. I'm sitting here in GB News, actually. I've just come off air earlier on, and they've lent me a room to do this seminar with you today, or this event with you today. GB News as regards a right-wing channel. Well, I've just been on there saying some of the things I've been saying to you just now. They let me do that. Why shouldn't they? But the BBC won't. In fact, the BBC, I wrote, as you know, Graham, as a Privy Councillor, I might say, to the BBC editor of the Today programme, and saying, I want to talk to you about your coverage of royal matters. I'm still waiting for a reply. I've sent them a reminder, waiting for a reply. How many anti-royal brochures have we heard in the BBC at any time in the last 12 months? Very few indeed. And when I was on the Today programme about 2 years ago, as you know, I think, I had an interview on Prince Charles's finances, making the point that, first of all, the Duchy of Cornwall used to be a government department, and therefore, for the royal family to say it's private is simply to annex something which is public to their own benefit. But if it is private, then why wasn't Prince Charles paying corporation tax like any other private estate does? That was my thrust of my comments. The interviewer put Princess Charles's point of view quite properly. It was a very fair interview. Well, as your listeners and participants today won't know necessarily, within an hour, St James's Palace was on the phone to the BBC complaining about the interview. How dare I be given the space to make those points? And the BBC, with its usual backbone like a chocolate eclair, then duly apologised for in the interview about an hour later on the Today programme. I mean, this is what we're faced with. We're faced with a compliant, useless BBC, which is supposed to be our national broadcaster, who is incapable of running a proper debate about matters of such importance.
Tommy, have you had similar experiences with the media? I don't know how much. The media is a little bit different in Scotland. Does it deal with this differently?
Well, people on the call might be glad to know that the national newspaper, which is the newspaper that supports independence, did a Jubilee special today. it was 16 pages of criticism of the monarchy and criticism of the Jubilee and talking about the need for an alternative. So it was probably different. But the rest of the papers, I mean, I have a story coming about about my correspondence with the keeper of the Privy Purse, trying to find out whether any monies have gone to fund Andrew's settlement with Victoria Giuffre, and which I tried to place in a paper yesterday. Can't tell you what it is, but anyway, it's not in tomorrow's paper, because the journalist I was talking to, in fact, the political editor I was talking to, said, look, we can't get anything in that's critical this weekend. It is wall to wall sycophancy, and this is in a non-Tory supporting newspaper in Scotland, and he said, wait till Monday till it dies down, and we'll splash it then. So I've done that, but I mean, I think that's an example. Yes, I mean, the press here are the press. It's a bit different because we do have some different press, and in fairness, you might be able to catch this on iPlayer or online if you can. But BBC Scotland News tonight, they had a camera at the Republic rally that we just had, so maybe there might be they might cover that. I don't know, but generally it's been wall to wall sycophancy. I mean, I think just how bad the BBC is brought home to me last night when I was listening to Radio 2 playing, in the evening, they're playing a whole string of hits from the 80s, including, The Clash, A Town Called Malice and stuff like this. And the DJ comes on and says, we're having a right royal knees up. I mean, it's like, is there nothing they won't try and brand with the royal standard? It's
I'm going to disagree with Tony for one thing, because it was the Jam who did A Town Called Malice.
Sorry, the Jam. Sorry. But I think it was the Clash. I Fought the Law. That's what it was. Plus,
that's the one,
by the Jam, and that was those songs were taken in vain as supporting the monarchy.
Yes. But I mean, the last time the BBC showed any guts was when Andrew Rossendale, a Tory MP, wrote to Newsnight and said you should be playing God Save the Queen at the end of the programme. And they duly played God Save the Queen by the Sex Pistols. It was the last time I saw any back from the BBC. But look, I mean, what the monarchy does, and the establishment's complying with it, is present an image which is inaccurate, which is a favourable image, which doesn't have any negative aspects to it. And there are all sorts of controls. There's a chapter in my book called The Box of Tricks, which explains what they do. But one of the things they've done, of course, is shut down freedom of information. Freedom of Information Act originally applied to the royal family, and Blair committed that it would do so. And since then, they've niggled away at it. And when Prince Charles's spider letters were revealed, showing him interfering improperly in political matters, after that, the palace, Prince Charles in particular, campaigned for the royals to be exempted. And now there's an absolute blanket ban on anything coming out from freedom of information on the Queen, Prince Charles, or Prince William. Absolute blanket ban. And it goes further than that. I've done a freedom of information request to the Metropolitan Police, who, as people will know, keep meticulous records of things. And I've asked them where Prince Andrew's security detail was on the night when he was either sweating or not sweating in a nightclub, or he was at Pizza Express in Wokingham. Where was his security detail? It's on the record. They'll have a record of it. Well, they're not telling me. Why won't they tell me? There's no security implications from that. All there is embarrassment for the royal family if they tell me what the answer is. And, it's the same with royal wills. We're told that royal wills are uniquely kept secret. Other wills aren't in our country, but royal wills are kept secret. Why? To avoid the royal family being caused any embarrassment. Well, the embarrassment comes from behaving in an embarrassing way, and not by the publication of a will.
I mean, this was quite an interesting point that was made by Dominic Grieve when this battle for the letters, the Guardian's battle for the letters, he said, we don't want these letters seeing the light of day because the public might not like what Charles is saying. So, well, if we don't like what he's saying, we ought to know about it. But he seems to think that it's better to pretend he's neutral than to prove that he's not, which is an extraordinary statement from a and Attorney General. We've got a load of questions, but it's slightly overrunning, but that's not a problem, I don't think. We have a load of questions from the audience, and this is Matt. If you didn't catch it earlier, he said he's going to read the questions.
The first question I think is obviously interesting, because we're talking about the political aspect of republicanism, and of course, we sort of know the answer, but I just wondered if you could talk about it a bit, which is, why are MPs so reluctant to criticise the monarchy? Obviously, there's an electoral thing, but I wonder how do we combat that problem? How do we combat a situation where 1/4 of this country is Republican in some format, and yet there's probably a handful of elected representatives who do that in this country?
Well, I mean, it's seen as a vote loser. It's seen as 94th in importance on the agenda, and it's seen as a vote loser to deal with it, which is why, no doubt, Keir Starmer was writing a piece in the Daily Telegraph this week saying how wonderful the Queen is, because that's where he thinks the votes are, and it's a safe thing to do. You're right. I mean, there should be, by any stretch of imagination, if 1/3 of the population is Republican, or even 1/4 is Republican, there should be about 200 MPs, 150 MPs who are Republican. I can't think of more than half a dozen. Really, I mean, apart from people like Chris Bryant, almost no one's asking questions at all. But the practice of MPs down the decades has been to leave it alone because it's not worth the hassle. That's how they've taken the view on it. And I'm afraid, as far as the Labour Party is concerned, they caved in 1924 when the first Labour government was formed, when they had to decide whether to go to the palace in top hat and tails, in morning dress, whatever they were wearing, or whether they're going to go in what they normally wore. And they caved in at that point and took on the morning dress. And the only minister who was sacked from the Labour government, who was, by the way, the housing minister, regarded as the most effective minister, was the one who wouldn't dress up in morning dress. So, right the way down from 1924 onwards, people have caved in. I suppose to Charles Kennedy, when he was Lib Dem leader and I was Lib Dem MP, went to the palace when he became leader and became a Privy Councillor, as I have done. And he came back to me and said, I can see why you're a Republican. But didn't mean he ever said anything about it. No one ever did.
Yeah, I mean, I don't quite know why there are so very, very few MPs. I mean, I think there is. Norman's absolutely right. There's a pressure on everyone to just shut up about it and say nothing. And most people, regard silence as the course of least resistance. So they do. But I think there's also a false perception, and that because of all of the PR that surrounds the monarchy, I think MPs think that they are more popular, and criticism of them is more frowned upon than it actually is. I mean, I think there is a lot of dissent amongst the general public about spending millions of pounds on lavish celebrations while people are starving. I mean, it's like this is cutting through with people, and I think if a few MPs were able to stand up a bit more, they might be surprised at the fact that they would get support from their constituents. I mean, it depends how you do it. There's no point being gratuitously offensive to individuals, but if you actually just raise serious arguments, I think you can get through. I mean, when I got elected in 2015, obviously, like they do with everyone, the Tories, crawled through my back catalogue of social media posts and found a few choice remarks about the royal family, and they got me into, they Express in the Mail they tried to do a number on me, but it misfired on them really quite badly, because I represent a seat in which the local football team is called Hibernian, and it's like not one that's prone to royalism. So if anything, it boosted my profile, not just amongst my activists, but amongst my electorate in a good way. And I think there's got to be other seats in the country where that is the case as well. So hopefully we will, again, when the succession comes, I think this will change, because there's a lot of people, if you speak to privately in the House of Commons, say, of course, they're Republicans and they think it's all ridiculous, but they just feel they can't criticize anybody in the current context. But that will change.
We have a strange constitution where we have a head of state and a parliament, and they seem to run in parallel worlds and rarely cross over unless it's a jubilee. I mean, the Queen never gets herself involved in the politics, and the politicians ignore. I mean, scandal after scandal over the last 2 years, they've said almost nothing about it. So it's quite an odd situation that we end up in.
One more.
Mm.
Norman, you mentioned having to swear the oath when you took your seat in the Commons. Just a few questions from the chat about what would happen if you didn't do that. Is there any way? Is it just a 3-line whip? What happens in that situation where an MP is elected but they refuse to? It's just a question.
Well, I mean, first of all, when I took my oath, I gave my own oath. It's quite interesting. I knew I'd have to give the official oath, so I gave my own oath first of all, which started everybody about supporting democracy and all that sort of stuff, and then read out the words very, very fast and very dismissively that I was supposed to read out. When it came to Hansard the next day, which is the official record of Parliament, my own oath didn't appear. Only the words which they wanted me to have said appeared in Hansard. So even Hansard is corrupted to pursue this. Now, the answer to the question is that if you don't take the oath, you cannot take your seat. And if you take your seat without having taken the oath, you are then fined so much per day, as I seem to remember. And eventually, after a bit, you're excluded. I mean, obviously, it's the same thing almost as the if you go back to Tony Wedgwood Benn, as he was called, Anthony Wedgwood Benn, when he wanted to take a seat in the Commons, and he was at that point a peer, and had to change the rules for him. But the oath hasn't changed really since, well, for centuries, apart from the fact that you're now able to affirm rather than saying that you pretending that you believe in God.
I mean, the most odious and awful phrase in the oath is the term "and her heirs and successors," because you are pledging not just allegiance to one individual, but to one family in perpetuity. And I think it's grotesque, but as Norman says, if you don't take it, you won't get to do your job, which is exactly the situation the Sinn Féin MPs are in, of course. I mean, because they, I mean, the reason why they're not sitting in the House of Commons is because they refuse to take the oath.
And they produced a much better oath for Northern Ireland for the Stormont Parliament, which talks about serving the community and so on. So we could really do with the Stormont oath being transferred to the House of Commons. But this thing is pervasive; it goes right down society. Even Boy Scouts are supposed to take an oath to the Queen. Yeah. Although interestingly, the police, I think I'm right in saying the police have to take an oath in England, but not in Scotland.
There was one MP. Go on, Tommy.
Well, like Norman says, an awful lot of people, and I mean most of my group, and I think a lot of the Labour people as well, they preface the oath with their own statement to basically make clear that they are saying this under duress and they don't really mean it. Which is, but providing the words come out of your mouth, you can take your seat.
It's the same oath in Hollywood, isn't it? I think, or similar.
No, I think the oath is different, but you do have to pledge allegiance to the Queen. Yes,
it's only Northern Ireland that doesn't have to do that. But the ludicrous situation is, if you had a political party that campaigned on a platform to abolish the monarchy, and they won a majority in Parliament, they would have to take an oath of allegiance to the Queen or whoever's in charge at that point before they could take their seats.
And pass legislation to abolish the monarchy.
Yeah, the nonsense of the oath. There was one MP who managed to take his seat without taking the oath, which was Paul Flynn. And there was one Parliament quite some time ago where he took the oath in Welsh, and there was no one else in the chamber that spoke Welsh. So he said something quite different. So anyway, we are at the end of the conference, and I want to say a huge thank you to both of you, Norman Baker and Tommy Sheppard, for joining us, and it's been really interesting chat. And thanks also for all your help and support over the years, and I'm sure we'll be doing lots more campaigning together in the future. And a huge thank you to everybody else. We've had probably 150 to 200 people online over the last few hours, which has been fantastic. Huge thank you to all of our other speakers. Huge thank you to Matt and to Pam and Bram and Arnold in the background who've been helping out. Don't forget, don't go to Amazon, go to republic.org.uk/shop where you can buy this and mugs and God knows how many other things we've got on there. And of course, donate, join and get involved. So someone said just a moment ago that on the chat, thank you very much. This has exercised the Jubilee nonsense. So I hope it's been therapeutic as well as entertaining and informative. And that's it for us. We're going to shut the the video and mute it, but we'll leave it on just for a few minutes whilst we pack up so that the chat can continue until we're all gone. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.